And business tonight, all Singapore-listed companies will soon need to disclose the exact amount and breakdown of salaries and other payments made to their directors and their chief executive officers. The new rule takes effect for annual reports prepared for the financial years ending on or after the 31st of December 2024. Now, the regulatory arm of the Singapore Exchange says this will help investors assess whether the directors and CEOs are appropriately incentivized. Salaries and bonuses are among the information that must be disclosed, as well as benefits in kind and long-term incentives. Independent directors will also see their tenure limited to 9 years. The two-tier vote mechanism to retain independent directors who have served for more than 9 years will also be removed with immediate effect. The Monetary Authority of Singapore is revising the Code of Corporate Governance to reflect the new rules. For more on the new rules, we are joined by Professor Lawrence Loh, Director of the Centre for Governance and Sustainability at NUS Business School. Prof, thanks for joining us today. Well, what do you make of the revised measures?
First of all, I think if you look at the issues from a broader perspective, I think it's definitely very timely and critical. Timely because if you look at the environment now globally in terms of economics, we are facing slowdown in growth, we are facing high inflation. So there's a lot of uncertainties being induced. And critical, meaning that now we are in an era where climate change is important, sustainability will be a centerpiece for attention. So going forward, good corporate governance will be a very important bedrock for companies. And I think the measures now putting in this context will be definitely very timely and critical.
So, the aim is to, help ensure accountability and transparency, especially in Singapore's capital markets. In what ways will this be carried out?
I think, first of all, if you look at, say, developments in global capital markets, many of these practices, particularly the disclosure of, say, salaries and pays for the leaders, I mean, these have already been practiced in advanced economies, for example, US, UK, Australia, and of course, even regional bosses like Hong Kong and Malaysia. They are actually requiring some of this disclosure. So I think what we are doing now is actually in alignment with some of the key I would say parameters that stakeholders will want to see going forward. So I believe we definitely need to up the game in the face of investors that are coming from global sources.
So, since Singapore is not, alone in this, but of course, Singapore companies are also not alone when they have concerns that, having too much transparency is going to impact their competitiveness. Do the benefits, sort of outweigh the cost?
I think, first of all, definitely it's going to be a very delicate balance. I think we are drawing actually a very fine line between protecting some of the very sensitive or even sometimes confidential information of companies. But having said that, I think it is good for us to take a bold step forward and enhance this very transparency that is going to be very, very essential for stakeholders, particularly the shareholders, to base their decisions on. So I think the game is actually a bit sensitive, but to be fair, the market for talent is something where it's a bit, I would say, unique. All the players, particularly even the intermediaries or headhunters, already know the figures. So I mean, for the CEOs, for the directors, I think if we draw a line to them, I think it's definitely quite, I would say, appropriate for our market.
Well, Professor, also something that came up today is that the tenure of, independent directors, that's going to also be limited to 9 years. So how will that impact succession planning and especially the issue of longevity for those Singapore-listed companies?
Yes, I think if you look at the issue of longevity, I will say precisely because of longevity, we need a 9-year rule. I think it might be quite contrarian or even paradoxical, but precisely because of this ability to refresh, to revitalize the boards, I think it will promote the perpetual interest of the company because you have, a flow of new perspective, new insights, new practices that are up to, date with key developments. So I'd say for companies, it will actually not bring them down. In fact, it will go forward. And I would just want to say that, we actually need mechanism to release the seats on the boards of directors for new people to come in. I mean, sometimes you see directors being as old as the furniture in the boardroom. I don't think it's a good sign. So I believe this will be a good measure to ensure a very healthy throughput of new ideas all the time.
So refreshing and keeping things new, and also seeing that Singapore has quite a small talent pool to dip into for independent directors. Very quickly, do you have any suggestions on how we can grow this?
I think you can actually unpack this problem into three parts. One is you look at the demand, the supply, and then the matching. First, you look at the demand. What we are seeing now is actually elevating the demand for new talent, for leadership on the board in particular, and I think it's very, very good. But I think other suggestion I would say is to look at the supply of directors. I think we need some system where directors can actually elevate their readiness to serve on the boards. And I think it's very important that, directors coming from all sources, including diverse characteristics, have to come in, including even gender. So I would say this is important. And I think the last point is the matching. We need some ways to, to make the demand and the supply meet. Yeah. And I think there will be some institutions, organizations, even like Singapore Institute of Directors, or even educational institutions can come in to play this matchmaking role.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that, Professor Loh. I've been speaking with on corporate governance and transparency with Professor Lawrence Loh, Director of the Center for Governance and Sustainability at NUS Business School.